There we go.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's spring.
Yeah, I did hear that Colorado got some snow though, or just recently. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really kind of cool because when I got back yesterday to Colorado, the grass is green.
Huh?
And so apparently the last snowstorm which apparently was a big one, because I look out my backyard and I see some damage back there. So Gary, you had a big snowstorm here, huh? Because you're in Colorado.
Well, that was a little while, about a month ago.
Oh,
Was the
okay.
big- Yeah,
So I guess it was
And,
just my wife, because she's in the southwest corner, and I guess that she got a little bit of snow down there just yesterday. So
yeah. Well, we were supposed to get a little bit last night about 2 o'clock in the morning, but woke up and didn't see anything. So, snow is a 4-letter word.
yeah.
Everybody else is looking at spring and they're out in shorts and whatever, and we're still shoveling snow. That is so wrong.
Yeah, it was really cool to be flying over the beaches and the water yesterday and just looking at the water flying in, and then all of a sudden I started seeing the mountains and the snow-covered mountains, and I was sitting next to a little lady, 80-year-old lady, beautiful. I made a new friend. But anyway, I said, look down there, look at all that snow. And she's from Maine, and she was like, whoa.
So sweet.
So that shouldn't be too surprising for her.
Well, I don't know. Is there snow in Maine? I didn't
yeah.
ask her that question.
They're farther north than we are.
I guess so. But she lives in Mexico. She lives by Guadalajara. So it was kind of interesting.
Maybe she's been there so long she forgot what it looks like.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. She lives down there permanently. So
It was a reminder why she lives down there permanently.
right. She's an artist. I loved her. She's my new friend. But I like to make new friends everywhere I go. But my problem is I just have to remember all their names, and I need to be like you, Gary. I think you have a system where you remember everybody.
Well, it's the story. People remember stories, they forget facts, and they name it as a fact. And so that's why I own the beaverguy.com. I own the Traction Coach. I own No Try Guy. I mean, the stories is how people really, and that's the way I am. I recognize the face, and I want them to speak long enough to I remember the story and then able to get back to a name.
That's fabulous advice. I mean, just like I said, she told me a whole story about how she became an artist, and her and her husband, he passed away, but how she became this just blooming artist. And she just told me the entire story. So now her name's Pat, and now I can remember her, So I think that's a great advice,
So stories are critical. So I just want to let everybody know that our people that are joining that welcome, and we're just having a chat for a few minutes before we start here. But one story that I haven't heard from you, Gary, and I know that it exists, is you had the chance to fly a what is it, P-51 Mustang once?
Yeah, P-51 World War II fighter. It's Mustang. People ask me how I was able to do that, and part of the story is I teach a process called writing get statements, and it's putting that it's more than affirmations, it's more than goals. And I had really wanted to fly with sky fighters, which is you go up and dogfight. And so I was in an in-flight magazine traveling back from somewhere, and all of a sudden an ad popped up about flying this P-51. And so I went down to Kissimmee, Florida, wrote a check, and in my logbook, I actually have flying, very few pilots have that in their logbooks. And flew with a former F-16 pilot, did all the acrobatics, and it was one of the 10 best days of my life. And it was a 3-camera shoot, so at my programs I show a couple of clips of that flight.
Oh, that's great. Do you have those clips somewhere, like on YouTube or something?
I think they are on YouTube. If not, they should be.
Yeah.
I'll have to talk to my assistant about that. You know, I talk about the cobbler's kids. You know, as a business coach, I'm always doing this for other people.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to my stuff, everyone go, well, why isn't it up there? I go, oh, good idea.
Yeah. Like you said, stories, that's what draws people in, and that's part of your story. You're adventurous, you're always seeking a thrill, and you know that inspires people. Same thing with Shah traveling, like these things inspire people. We think, oh, I'm just posting a picture or a video, but we don't know how many people are seeing that and being impacted by that. So yeah, we got to put more out there, put
Well,
more
you know,
Yeah.
content.
my whole
But then
thing
people
is,
people know more about you than you think that they know. You know what I
Oh.
mean? You're like, oh, you knew that about me.
yeah, I know. It's just like, but people will bring it up, you know. And you know, one of the things that is the benefit of that is it allows people in a way to give them permission to go in and do it for themselves.
Right.
And you know, Shaw, you were just mentioning, you know, in that one period of time, you went somewhere and never went back until now. Now you're traveling the world and doing all this other stuff, and
Yeah.
we forget we have a choice. And you know, people truly, you know, they go, well, how did that happen? Were you just lucky? I go, I wrote a check, but I had it in my mind. I wanted to do
Yeah.
something.
Well, I tell all my employees, if you want to come visit me, I always have a guest bedroom, but you can't stay more than a week.
Well, they used to say no more than 3 days. It's like fish. After 3 days, both stink.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there is a beautiful hotel next door you could go to, and then I'll come visit your pool over there.
There you
There
go.
you go.
And one of my friends did that. She got the next door Westin, and I stayed at her pool.
There you go.
Nice.
All right.
All
well,
right, we're about to get started here.
we've had a few people hop on. All right. Well, let's get started, shall we? Let's get going.
Sounds
All right.
good.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for hopping on and joining us for the People Strategies Forum. You may or may not know, we run this forum every week, each week with a different speaker. And I'm really excited about today because we have a really wonderful speaker coming up shortly. If you were just tuning in, we were just talking about some of his adventures. So very fun, adventurous guy. I think you're going to love him. And a little bit about the People Strategies Forum, just for anyone that doesn't know what we do here. This is a mastermind. It combines leaders that are dedicated to creating workplaces where people thrive, employers reward, and customers love. So it helps a little bit of everybody. And then I want to introduce our panel. All right, so my name is Jules, and I help moderate and host these sessions each and every week. I'm an on-camera coach, so I help people show up more confidently on camera, and I will be looking for all the questions and comments that you have. So if you do have any questions at all, or want to say anything to our speaker or any of our other panelists as well, just drop them in the chat box, and we'll definitely get to those. And I'm going to introduce Shah. So Shah is not only with the comp team, she has her superpower is talent management. She has over 20 years of HR experience, and she founded her own company just a few years ago as well. And now she's back in Colorado. So the last few weeks she's been in Mexico, and we've been super, super jealous, of course, of her adventures. But so it's nice to see you from the other side.
Yes, I'm back.
We also have Sam. So Sam is the founder and CEO of Comp Team. He's also traveling around in the US Virgin Islands. So we have something else to be jealous about today. And he brings us these wonderful sessions every week. So he finds the speakers, brings them on so that you can get a lot of value out of each and every session. And Sam is fantastic at creating compensation plans for companies, talent management. So we have a really good, strong panel today. Sumit, I'm not sure if he's going to be joining us, but he is with the Comp team as well. And I'm going to introduce our wonderful speaker today, Gary Barnes. So there's a lot we can say about Gary. He's the Breakthrough Business Mastery Coach. As you can see, his bio is nice and long. So he's a high performance business and sales strategist. He's the speaker. He's an author of 9 books, an Amazon best-selling author. He's been featured in the Miami Herald, CBS Money Watch, Morningstar, NBC, TEDx, and many, many more. And he also is the founder of Gary Barnes International. So today we're going to, well, the name of the session today is Leadership Beyond the Numbers. I think Gary is the perfect person to take us through this session. And Gary, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm going to let you have the floor because I know you have a lot to share.
Well, thank you so much. I almost feel like this is home because I believe this is the 4th time or 5th time I've been had the privilege of being here. So
Thank you.
I just enjoy you guys so much.
We enjoy having you, Gary.
Wonderful having you, Gary. But what I'm curious about, Gary, is I know that you have you're an author of 9 books. So which one of those books are your favorite?
Out of the 9 books, I only really talk about 3 of them. The first one is How a Beaver Saved My Life. It's actually the talk that I get booked around the world for the most. TEDx called me to do TEDx because of that book. And in 1988, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and was told I would be dead or in a wheelchair within 10 years. And so that is the story of, and I created it as it's not an MS book, but an adversity book. So it's applicable to any challenge that anybody is looking at, whether it be personal or business, whatever they're facing, financial. The second book is Spend and Grow Rich. And I'm a recovering financial planner. I own one of the largest independent financial planning firms, built into the top 3% in the United States. And it's not an investment book, but the psychology and the mental aspects of money. How do we relate to money? What is it that we do? Budgets don't work. So I created a spending plan for myself and then put it in a book. And then the third book is The Power of Get Statements. And that's what I was mentioning earlier about the P51. And the word GET, I created an acronym, and it's Great Expectations Today. And so those are the 3 books that really are the most popular and the ones that I really use the most. One of them I actually don't use at all because a publisher, it's called the Book of Garyisms. I have been known to come up with certain sayings over the years. And what they did was they said, we'll pull all of your information off your website, off your talks, and we'll publish it, and we just want to do it for you. Well, when I saw it, they had plagiarized Stephen Covey.
Oh, no.
They gave me credit with start with the end in mind. I go, if you're going to steal from somebody, please have them be dead. And so that's, it's actually up on Amazon. I do not own it, but I don't, do anything with it. So it's an interesting journey. By the way, I don't like to write. I hate writing. I have no feelings in my hands. I didn't learn how to type, so I spoke in all of my books.
Oh, wow.
That's really cool.
I know the topic today is leadership, and I think one of the biggest pieces that that cross over with that is in your books that you just mentioned is really your journey with MS, multiple sclerosis, and how you overcame that and so forth. So can you tell us, just for the audience, tell us a little bit about what happened and how you rose to overcome MS?
Yeah, it was 1988, so there was not a lot known about the illness. In Colorado, where I live, 1 out of every 1,000 people have the diagnosis. And so I was 33 years old. I was a man, obviously. So I was outside the parameters. Normally, the demographic was women between the ages of 20 and 30, somewhere in that area where most. I went numb from the neck down. I lost the ability to walk, to write. The doctor literally just said, go home and enjoy your kids while you are able, that you're not going to be there with them very long. And the leadership aspect of this is so much of the time when we are told something, whether it be in business, in our personal lives, in political, religious, whatever the arena is, we give up our leadership to other people. And what it looks like for me is having a voice. And so even though the doctor said that they were doing, that this was his professional opinion, that's why I have never owned it. I have never said I had. I've always said I was diagnosed with, which meant it was someone else's opinion. Now, I was numb from the neck down, so I did not deny the things that I was dealing with, but I had to find a workaround. I had to, there's an old analogy of you come up to a mountain, you go over it, through it, around it, or, you just somehow you adapt. And in fact, like this morning, this dress shirt, my wife actually buttoned my buttons because I do not have the dexterity. And I'm a speaker, so I travel. So when I go to a hotel, I make friends with the front desk staff and they do my buttons. And what's really fun is when I go back to that same hotel over and over again, they argue who gets to help me. I get adopted. And so I don't make it a big deal. But the real story about the MS diagnosis is that, I could accept that and lost my voice. But as a leader of myself, see, that's the interesting thing is that we think leadership is external, but leadership starts from an internal stance, then it can be projected out externally. And we forget that there's two elements to it. And so if we're just doing an external, that's why sometimes people have a real hard time following it because they don't see that connection to that internal leadership that you have within yourself.
Love it. Well, you're a great speaker, definitely. And you're very inspiring. And you're absolutely right. Very inspiring to get through those obstacles and then also make friends. I mean, we all make friends to help one another, go through life. And that's fantastic.
Well, the one thing that I think we all have a real challenge with, no matter what our personality is really asking for help. And because somehow in the American tradition anyway, that's a sign of weakness. And in reality, you think back in the progression of business in the US is we went from the agrarian society, which was all about help because everybody did a specialization, which then went to the industrial age where you were confined and told what to do. So the asking for help actually was a deterrent, where in the agrarian society, it was a benefit. And then we went into the information age. And the information age just separated us even more to where we're supposed to know what. The first time I got onto a Windows computer, I pushed a button and the window went away. I thought I broke the computer. And everybody was laughing at me. It just, the number one question to computer companies, even today, is where is the any key, ANY? And they go, well, what are you talking about? Well, the book says press any key, and there's no any key on my computer. I mean, it just, so we're kind of wandering around in the wilderness. But I think we have totally transferred now into what I call the age of community. And the age of community is if we're not helping each other, if we're not holding each other together, that it's going to be that lone wolf that gets left out. And so the leadership aspects is very multifaceted.
Yeah, so one thing that I know that you have a boot camp, you call the Breakthrough Through Business Mastery Boot Camp, and among others, what are the other workshops you have?
I do a speaker boot camp, which is something that, so much of the time people say, I can't speak, it's supposed to be the number one thing people are afraid of. And one of the things that I teach around that is it's having a conversation. As long as you're speaking in your core, the things that you actually know, and part of it is I've given way over 1,000 talks, the TEDx and being on TV, radio, and all of that. And people say, well, you must, not be nervous anymore. And I go, I'm nervous before every time I do what I do. And in fact, I saw a documentary with Elvis Presley at the end of his year, and they said, it must be like falling out of bed. And he goes, well, no, I am so nervous before every performance, I go in and throw up. And
Oh,
they said, well,
geez.
how come? And he goes, someone in the audience, it's their first time, even though I've done it 10,000 times. And so I have to do it the same way. But when you hit the stage, you're on. And that's the way I am. Once I hit the stage, TEDx was one of the hardest because it was a very short 14-minute talk. But the point from the stairs to the red dot, because we were in a 5,000 seat arena. So there was a distance between there and there. I didn't want to fall down. So my concentration, once I hit the red dot, I had succeeded. And so, it's a unique thing. People really, once they start, and this is going back to what I said about leadership too, it's having a voice. Once you find your voice and have permission to use it in whatever way, whether it be one-on-one or one-to-many. And so the speaker boot camp is a lot of fun for me because I see people just blossom. And once they have that permission to have a voice. And then the other is a branding and marketing boot camp, where both words I think are misunderstood. Though people think that getting a logo, getting a website is the key. And really it's how do you position yourself? What is the elevate and separate elements that makes you different from, not better than? And so what is it that you can position yourself that makes you curious? Jules was saying that because I flew a P-51, it made me unique. It made me curious. And the things that I do, people are wondering, what is he going to be when he grows up? And so, it's living life. So those two things. And then the 3-day Breakthrough Business Mastery Bootcamp, number 40 is coming up in July.
Oh, wow.
And it's evolved. One of the things that I found as a leader, we can have an impact with individuals, but we run out of time. And really it evolved because I wanted to reach more people. And now it's become an international event. And I only do it 2 times a year now because it's exhausting. Because I speak about 22 hours over those 3 days.
Wow.
And so.
And you do those in person, Gary?
Do those in person. Even through the pandemic, we were limited to 50 people in a 1,400 square foot ballroom, 30 foot ceilings. So it was like speaking in a barn. But it forced us to do the hybrid to where we do the virtual as well. But we just heard from the hotel. It's in the city of Denver, which is the most, I want to say that's weird, conservative liberal, the most restrictive of any of the counties and cities in the Denver area. And we were just told we could have 400 people in the room with 2 people per 6-foot table. So the social distancing, I don't know what they're going to do with masks, but yeah, where we do them. I love the in-person because of the networking. You were talking about having that new friend on the airplane. I really live by the motto of Will Rogers. There are no strangers, just friends that I have not met yet. Yeah. And when I go to events, there's something magical about going to an event because of the connections. And we do some unique things like board breaking. When we talk about breakthrough, it's not just mental, we actually do it physically as well. So yeah, they're a lot of fun.
That's fantastic. I'm so super proud of you for being able to endure and through that period where everything was shut down and then rebuild yourself through the virtual space like we have. We have a similar story with CompTeam and started doing these virtual events, and now just kind of the new normal now, so I love the fact that your new normal is a little bit different looking and talking in these large ballrooms, but it's possible. It's possible to still have social distancing and make new friends in a personal way. So I've definitely missed all of that. So that's fantastic.
You know, in a way, it's a parallel to the MS story, because we were told to shut down. We were told we can't do things. People were told they can't get here. And because of that adversity, if you will, we went to the hybrid where it was very expensive. The hotel wanted $6,800 just for the internet and for
Wow.
3 days. I mean, it's like, excuse me. We negotiated it down to 1,200, but still, there was a much larger investment on our part. But because of that, we expanded our international reach to South Africa, to India, the UK, and there was another country. But you know, it just like, okay, it gave that adversity, opened up a brand new opportunity. And because of that, we're going to keep the virtual. And it also, when people are, you know, on the fence, it allows them to check in and be a part of it. And the interesting thing is how to integrate those two processes at the same event. And
Right.
it's
I have to just say this, Gary. So I was in the airport yesterday, as I mentioned earlier, and you know those Bubba Gump restaurants where you watch Forrest Gump and your Elvis story. I never noticed the scene before, I guess, because you know they play it over and over and over in that restaurant if you ever go to that restaurant. But so all around the restaurant is the Forrest Gump movie. And I finally stopped to watch where Forrest had his leg, where his legs were in the braces. And there was a young Elvis Presley playing the guitar with him because he was his friend, right? And Bubba and the young kid with the braces on his legs was moving his legs with the braces so he could try to move his legs. And if you watch that scene, then you watch Elvis Presley later mimicking the same way that little Forrest was moving his legs, right? And that's why that movie is, I think, has been just so iconic, I guess you could say, because it shows this kid that had a disability, and then his entire life, he, even with his disabilities and his restrictions, he met the president and he did all these amazing things. And that's when you brought up that story, it just kind of reminds me about overcoming the challenges in life and making friends with people that eventually, I think in the next scene, they show Elvis becoming this massive superstar, right? and his dance was because of this little kid with braces on his legs.
Right. So I think one of the big things that you talk about in your breakthrough mastery class is that you talk about the importance of vision and mission and telling those stories, and like Shar was saying, having a greater influence on different people and so forth. So in that session, when you're explaining to leaders on how to find that mission and vision and their direction, how do you recommend that they transfer that knowledge or get those fans in their employees?
Well, the first part is, again, the leadership internally. And most people, I don't know how accurate this is, but it's been said for a long time, people plan more for their vacation than they do for their life. And so, there's a piece in Alice in Wonderland where Alice comes up to the Cheshire Cat and she says, which is the right road? And he goes, well, where do you want to go? And she goes, I don't know. And he says, well, any road will get you there. And so the thing is that how do we determine what our vision, what our mission is, not just throwing something up on the wall for people to follow? Followers will find you. This is a unique thing. There's also the difference with if you're in an organization, if you're a employer with employees, but for some reason, those people gravitated to the organizational, whether it be products, services, mission, whatever. But if you don't know what the end result is, I mentioned Stephen Covey, start with the end in mind. And so the 3-part process that I talk about at the boot camp is, number one, dream build. What is it that it just brain dump? You ask yourself, what do I want to do, have, be, go? And do, be, have, go, and give. Those 5 things. And what happens is those 5 areas encompass your entire life and business. And so when you get very open and creative, you may have a brain dump where it says Learjet. And you go, oh, that little voice says, you don't need a Learjet. Why do you need a, that's for other, there's 2 words actually that I suggest when that happens. Because that little voice is you, by the way. And so those 2 words are not now. This is just a time. It's not saying you're going to activate on these things that you're putting down on this piece of paper, but those are the possibilities. And then the second step is creating that dream into a goal. And the only thing that you have to do to make a dream into a goal is to set a date of accomplishment. By the way, don't do a deadline. A deadline, the older I get, I don't like words with dead in them anyway. But the thing is deadline actually was created in the Civil War, when the soldiers were capturing both sides at such a rate they didn't have the raw materials or the time to build stockades. And so they took the butt of their rifle, drew a line in the dirt, and said, you stay on that side, you live, you cross that line, you're dead. It literally meant a dead line. And so a date of accomplishment, what is it? And a specific date. It's not like going into the future and going, well, I'd like to do it in 2023 or 25 or whatever. It's July 24th, 2022. That's a date of accomplishment. And you want to look out somewhere between 12 and 18 months. Going beyond that, you lose that urgency, that motivation to go and get something accomplished. What I say is, if you're wanting to lose 20 pounds and you're wanting to have it accomplished in 3 years, when are you going to show up at the gym? And it's probably going to be about 2.5 years from now. So there's no urgency. And then the third step is, and this is the unique thing that I teach, is creating that date of accomplishment, that goal, into a vision, to where you go into your future and you can see it, taste it, and feel it, and bring that energy back to the present time. And now you're being pulled towards it. You're not going to it. There's a totally different energy around it. But what we're doing with the get statements is we're rebooting, reprogramming the reticular cells in our brains. Those are the cells that allow information through to our conscious awareness that tells us to pay attention. And so if you've ever bought a new car, and all of a sudden you drive it off the lot, and all of a sudden you see that same car, that same color, and you hadn't noticed them before, were those cars always there? And they were, but we didn't have any connection to that, but now you do. The same thing in business. There's another old story about 2 salespeople that go into a third world country, and the first salesperson gets off, looks around, goes to a payphone, calls his home office and says, put me on the first plane back because no one here wears shoes. Second shoe salesman comes off the plane, looks around, goes to the payphone and calls his home office and says, send me every pair of shoes in the warehouse because no one here has shoes. And so it's the same stimulus, a different interpretation, and then a different outcome. And so those 3 things really, incorporating what your vision is and then showcasing it to where people that are seeing and hearing and following what you're doing, it's almost like children. Children will do what you do, not what you say. And so as people see you living what you're speaking about, what you're preaching about, if you will, or teaching, sharing, then those people that align with that message will follow you organically.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I
Well,
absolutely agree. Go ahead, Sam.
No, I was just going to say that, but one thing that stops a lot of leaders from accomplishing their goal is one of the bigger things is just the fear, overcoming the fear. There's imposter syndrome. There's a fear of failure and different things. So I know that's one thing that you talk about with leadership. And so what is the way to overcome that?
Accepting your own, value. One of the things, when I work with people in different industries where there's licensing, whether it be accountants or, I worked with doctors. And I go, well, you already know more than anybody else on the planet just by having that information. A realtor knows more than 99% of the population, even if you're, quote, new. So if you weren't qualified, I think most everyone really knows when they've exceeded their level of competence. And that's where we go back to having permission to ask for help, ask for more information, more assistance in getting the knowledge that you need. But the imposter syndrome is, I think more laid out in the North America community, because I work with clients around the world, and I don't hear it as much from other societies. But what we are told is be humble. And it's really funny because I told one of my clients not too long ago, do you realize you're egotistical about being humble? It was like, oh, okay. But it was a different reflection. I go, do you know what you know? Yes. It's like speakers. Um, I think most of us have been at events or been places where the speaker is on stage and they're terrible, but they got paid a lot of money. I mean, there was one that I saw years ago. They were paid $50,000, and this was their first point. People buy from other people. I started laughing. I had to leave. I mean, it got worse from there. People pay with money. 50,000. I mean, they're terrible. Do you have a message? Do you have the competence in an area, and to be able to not be egotistical about it? Because what I find with true leaders listen more than they speak. I am on a number of boards. I'm on a nonprofit board, and they are always saying, Gary, why aren't you speaking more? Because I'm listening. My job here on the board it's not about me. It's about what I can give back to the board and what I see, what my reflection is of what's going on. And so that ability to listen and know within ourselves that it's okay to be us. There's another something about that, Sam, that I just thought of, is that internally, most of us are wanting validation. And when we are wanting external validation to justify who we are, we will always be wanting. When we accept ourselves for who we are, it will never be perfect, but it will always be enough. And so having that ability to be aware of ourselves, knowing where we are within our confidence level because of our competence level, then that imposter syndrome really starts going away. What will be interesting though is that, boy, I just keep, if I talk too much, just tell me to hush up. Is that when we are confident in ourselves, other people that are not confident in themselves will want to draw you down. And so sometimes it feels like it's a criticism about us, and actually it's a reflection about their own incompetence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really resonate with what you're talking about, Gary. Now that I'm back here in Colorado, I'm going to have a one-on-one with every one of my employees. And I'm going to take your advice, not do all the talking and stop and listen, because we're really working on more of a positive psychology. I love your deadline analogy there, more accomplishment, opportunity. And I think even in the last year, I mean, as a business leader, changing to more of a positive coaching conversation about competencies, drives, passions, interests, career mobility has really inspired my leadership to be just excited, enthusiastic, have energy, excitement, and enthusiasm. And it's just been a very interesting change than when I used to be a traditional HR person for a big company that really focused on performance management and was all about what's your numbers, what's your deadline, why didn't you hit your deadline, And it's interesting that now we're transforming into more of a positive, psychologically safe work environment of celebrating accomplishments. And so my one-on-ones are going to be just about that. What have you accomplished? what do you want to accomplish? How can I support you and give you the resources to help you be the best leader ever? So I love what you talk about.
Really, what you just described is something very unique in the corporate industries. And it doesn't matter what industry it is, it's pretty much a blanket strategy of you're here to make us money. Like when you're saying performance, you didn't hit your goal. Well, the goal was the company's goal, not your goal.
Right.
And when I've gone into large organizations, I turn the psychology around, like what you're saying, which I really applaud. Thank you.
Well, it's because of you. You taught me those things.
But it's so refreshing to hear you embrace it, because when I turn it around and go, let's go to the rank and file, the employees, and say, what is it that you want out of working here? What are you going to achieve? What is it that is your motivation to be a part of this process? And sometimes there's an element, they want to be around you, they like the products and service, but they never go beyond that to where they, because they feel like in some way they lose control. And in my mind, when somebody's accomplishing an external, maybe they will leave, but they were going to leave anyway, because either out of the accomplishment or the dissatisfaction. And do you want to have a raving fan, or do you want to have somebody that well, all they care about is making money and they just use people and throw them away? And so doing this, I almost said backwards, but the opposite, approach to it, you're actually going to build a stronger force, and your employees become partners, not just employees.
Oh, absolutely. I think my employees are definitely feeling that. And I've had leaders say, because I tell them career mobility, if you do want to leave the organization in a few years, or 6 months, let's just be open and candid and talk about it. And I'm going to celebrate you because you spent time with us. We learned from you. We appreciated your talent. And if you decide to go a different direction, like you talked about with Alice in Wonderland, and you want to go down a different road, I'm not going to be negative about it. In fact, I'm going to write you an outstanding review for your next employer. And just my employees knowing that that's how I lead them, they're like, wow, I've never had a leader ever say that to me. It's like, I've never had a leader say, I'm going to quit, and then they actually celebrate you, And so then I've had employees say, I think I want to work for you forever. I'm like, well, don't worry, you probably won't.
or they'll bring people to you. And I just saw a message pop up about failure is positive, and it is, because without failure, we would not be able to do what we're doing today. There were, we never see below the waterline of all of the things that didn't work until they got to the point where we're able to do what we do. And so failure is I think, as John Maxwell says, you want to fail forward. Right. Failure is not failure until you accept it as a failure. And so if you just see it as something that didn't work, this is another adage of mine, Gary has known as launch and adjust, is that, I love airplanes, as you guys know. And the question I ask is, when is an airplane 100% on course? What would you say?
If you all land and you don't die.
Okay, well, you're close. It's when it's on the ground.
Right. Okay, well, I was kind of close.
You're on the ground and you can point to where you're going to go. But the airplane was never designed to fulfill its destiny on the ground. But in the air, and this goes back to Sam, what you were talking about, the fear. In the air is the adversity. You're fighting forces that are natural, but out of our control. And so, you think about the Wright brothers, that, the 300-foot flight, the first one, or the celebration that we just watched on Mars, where that little helicopter went 10 feet off the ground for 40 seconds. And everybody's going, well, big deal. I go, well, it kind of is, because of what was going on there. But yeah, failure is, when we embrace it, is what did we learn from that? And the key is not to duplicate the same thing to get the same failure. Is what can we adjust to get a different result? Because that's really what we're looking for anyway. It's a progression.
Yeah, it's that psychological safe environment that allows that dialogue to happen, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I love about the TMA method is the foundation of positive psychology. And so it realizes that there's people have their strengths, and people have things that are not so strong in their skill set and their talents. And I think that's a topic you talked about as well, Gary, as far as identifying what, if you're a leader, is to identify what your strengths are and delegate those things that you're not so strong at, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
This is something that it's really not looking to be the specialist, but what you are actually competent in. Normally, the way we can really identify those areas is the things that we enjoy doing. Most of the time, if we enjoy doing it, we really are good at it. Now, there's a separate challenge to that, because if we're really good and competent in that, sometimes we don't see the value in it because it's easy for us. But what we're doing is saying, okay, this is my competence level. And if I'm doing something I'm not competent in, is what is it costing me? What is it costing the organization? And this is where you have to look for the climate, though, that you have permission to ask for help, that you can add in additional resources. And whether it is this is that area of what is the community around you? What is the environment that you're using? And sometimes even in an employer-employee relationship, there may be an employee that can do what you're needing done better, faster, higher quality than you can. Why not bring them up and give them additional recognition? The number one thing people want in the workplace is recognition. That has been that way forever. That's a raise is number three. I mean, come on, guys, let's embrace the relationship. And because of the relationship, production's going to go up. Because the production's going to go up, there's higher revenue that you now share with the rank and file. And so it's a symbiotic relationship. But yeah, it's staying in your core, because once we go beyond that, that's becoming, incompetent. And that's when, I see this quite often too, where you'll have somebody say they're a tremendous salesperson within an organization, and they move to middle management. They're totally out of their element. They're horrible at it, but they wanted the prestige. They wanted the higher pay maybe, and they end up either leaving the company or they go back down into the area where they were really happiest. And so identifying for ourselves, again, this is part of the leadership internally, not externally, of just really keying in on what are we good at, what do we enjoy, and then raising that excellence, because I want to be excellent at what I'm good at, not good at what I'm not good at. So,
Right.
Yeah, I've actually had that experience when we were doing internal interviews, because we only promote from within for management positions.
Mhm.
And we were interviewing multiple internal candidates. And one particular gentleman, his name is Joseph, and he wouldn't mind me telling you this, but he works from a wheelchair because he is paralyzed from, I think, the waist down, I believe. And we realized that he was just a genius at compliancy, and a genius at looking at how to accommodate from an ADA standpoint. And so what was interesting is that we ended up promoting him to manager of our compliancy department. And so we could have looked at it as that was a failure, that you didn't get the quote unquote mall manager job. But really what happened was we learned about his talents, his passions, his drives, and just his genius. And we moved him to a different type of role. And now he's just flourishing. So, it's pretty fascinating. And I'm proud of my senior team to be more open-minded to say, yeah, we think of our company structure this way, but if you really look at the talent and use the TMA and look at competency analysis and focus on the strengths and not just the weaknesses, but focus on the strengths, you can really empower your employees to really perform and make a big difference in the company.
Well, and you know, I think one of the important things that you're describing here, Shar, is every member of the team is as important as every other member of the team, whether they're out in front. The only way that I can do the boot camp is I have people behind me allowing me to do what I do.
Right.
I would not be able to do that. Back to the airplane analogy, I ask, on an airplane, what is the most valuable element of that aircraft? What's the most important element of that aircraft?
Well, I learned that turbulence is really not all that bad, because turbulence is really going through the air and keeping you up in the air.
Yeah, it's going to be there. But the aircraft itself, the plane itself, what is the most important element part of that airplane?
The
It's got to have
wings.
wings and an engine.
That's where most people go. But if we go deeper, it's actually the rivet that keeps that airplane together. That 50-cent rivet in the wings that holds everything together. If that rivet pops, airflow is disturbed, it no longer flies. And so we look at some of the things that are behind the scenes, or we think is, mundane maybe, but other people see that as exciting. Actuarials, I applaud them, but I shoot myself. It's not who I am. It's not my core. But they are as important as the person out in front connecting with the general public. And so when as an organization, as a leader, not to forget those individuals that allow everyone else to do what they do, and to also compensate them for that, not just because they are not the ones, quote, creating the revenue. Well, the person meeting the public, that's just the last part of being able to complete the system, the cycle. It's not more important. It's important, but it's not more important, because without those people behind them, they wouldn't be able to do it either.
Right. We need to celebrate the mechanic that puts the rivets in the wings.
No, I'd like to point out what Andre Bloom mentioned. He's one of the TMA international expert there for TMA on the chat here, and he mentioned that it's that inclusion of all those different ideas, right? It's not just taking a look at hierarchy, but it's identifying the talents across your organization and taking some of those great thoughts that everybody has and including that in our product, our process and product, right?
Yeah, going back to something you mentioned earlier again, Sam, is the fear element. And sometimes if we are not seen as a solution, in fact, I had a personal coach one time, and he said, Gary, for you to be successful, you have to become the savior of your clients. And I went, excuse me? I have to become the savior? No, that's not my role. And so, but if that is the mentality, is that it starts and ends with me, then the fear element is that World War II is also one of those things that I enjoyed. I just saw a movie clip of how the Enigma machine, the machine that the English created to decipher the codes from the Germans. And it actually started with a woman that they didn't want to let her in. But she solved the problem to come in to be a part of this system faster than even the instructors could do. Wow. And because of her, she connected with the guy that had the initial concept, but she had the one key that allowed it to work. And so it truly is a team. Like I said, we're in an age of community, because as a coach, I have coaches, because I can't see my own stuff. They're just like a doctor cannot be their own doctor, or an attorney cannot be their own lawyer. And so valuing these other people, even if they just come up with one idea that makes everything work, they're as valuable as someone that has been on the project for 3 years.
Oh, I love it. Absolutely love it. In fact, I love that, if you look at Netflix, not that we're all sitting around watching Netflix all the time, but there is some pretty inspiring shows out there. There's a show called The Wife, and it's about the wife that really was writing the books, but because at the time women weren't really seen. And so her husband was the one that always accepted the Nobel Prize. And she was the one really writing behind the scenes. There's several of those types of shows now coming out about accepting the fact of diversity and celebrating it. It's not going to be the traditional individual with the talent that's always hidden that you never see. And bringing and actually bringing them out and having those people on the stage, you know. So I love what you're saying.
Yeah, it's sharing the wealth, sharing the stage, sharing the celebration of accomplishment. No one does it by themselves anymore. Or I don't know
Right.
that they ever really did. And you know, it's just a unique time in the world to where we're finding ourselves more, in some ways, because of technology. Like we probably have people around the world on the call today. And because of that, we are tapping into a resource of humanity that 50 years ago, 20 years ago, I mean, even cell phones, if you think about the smartphone, what has been around for less than 20 years,
Yes.
we think it's been around now too, you know, but you know, we had the old flip phone and whatever, you know, I had one
Palm
of those flip phones.
Pilots.
Oh, Palm Pilot. I had a smartphone that was huge, big antenna coming out my car.
Yeah,
I
me.
thought it was cool. But now we can tap into the human mind computer, not just the internet. And
Right.
because of that, the creativity and you know, it's exciting for me to see what is really coming out of all this.
Yeah, I mean, I think technology is changing so fast. I mean, it's really challenging from an agility standpoint to really catch up to it. And it's funny what you mentioned earlier about the American Society and some of us that have actually traveled now. I remember when I first went down to Mexico, I was like, okay, I got to get to this destination. I need to go here. I need to go there. I need to get to Costco. I need to do this. And then I was told probably 20 times, Shar, don't worry, be happy. You know, don't worry, be happy. And then I learned what they called the Mexican time, you know, and it was like, slow down, get to know people, you know, you don't have to be everywhere at every minute, every time. And I think it really changed me, you know. So I think it is fascinating when we learn about other cultures and their belief systems and how they operate. And that's why we appreciate having diverse speakers, diverse participants, and we learn so much.
Yes, which and it's always a pleasure having you on, Gary. And I know we're coming towards the top of the hour, so I do want to take a moment right here to break and acknowledge some of our sponsors and so forth.
Right.
And so let me do that real quick here. And you know, as you know, we are a huge fan of the TMA method. You know, this is a process that you can use to better understand and know your colleagues, whether they're somebody you're trying to hire into the organization, or you know, if you're or it could be your supervisor or whatever. It can, you know, basically it's a tool that allows us to understand a person's talents and their drives, and to understand how they really thrive in the work environment. So as always, in what we part of our session here, we do have a way that you can sign up and take a look and do an assessment. If you'd like to try out an assessment, you can just go ahead and sign up here. We're at the very top button. I just launched a poll for those that are on Zoom, and you can select one of those free TMA assessments up there.
Yes. And my company has applied this, and you know, I have to tell you that I think the TMA method, and Andre Bloom, who I'm so glad that he's joined as the founder of this company and sponsor, I think that this particular tool has helped my company thrive and actually become very profitable, because it just changed the whole paradigm of how we lead and manage our teams. And so I just want to thank the TMA method for that. I mean, I think it's also made it very simplified. And I think just in time, using smart devices that my leaders can hire, train, develop, help with career transition. And it has been just a game changer for my company. So I can be a testament to that. And So thank you for bringing up that information.
Yeah, and if you'd like to learn more about the TMA method, if you're a coach, or if you'd like to learn how to use this in your practice, there's a special workshop that one of our colleagues in the Nordic area. TMA is a global tool. It's used around the world, and so Ted is going to have and Claire are going to have a discussion on how to leverage that TMA tool. And if you're interested in learning more, you can go to that bottom there. You see the tmanordic.com/events, and you can register for that class, that workshop. Also, I want to point out our speaker for next week. So we have Colleen Stanley, who is a good friend of mine. She is an expert on emotional intelligence, and so she's going to be talking about harnessing emotional intelligence. And especially, she's a sales leader, and she trains sales teams on how to do this. And so, if whether you are an executive or a manager or an HR professional, these concepts are golden. And I do encourage you to read her book. I mean, both her books are just great, but I really like the sales leadership one. I mean, the concepts in there could apply to any C-suite member or anything. So, but they're very powerful with the way that she puts these together. So I'd highly recommend that.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, that would be a really good one. I'm excited for that.
Yeah. So back to you, Gary. One more question to kind of wrap up things. I mean, I know that there's a couple points you say that are so important for leaders to have and to practice. And part of that is I believe it's to be seen and to be and to be safe and so forth. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. I really believe in any industry, whether employee, entrepreneur, C-suite, it doesn't matter. There's three elements for success. And the number one is to be seen. I had a client that was vice president of a very large banking system. And when we started working together, we were working on this, is having permission to be seen. And she went into a corporate meeting, and three people came up to her and said, "Are you new?" And she had been in that same meeting for 8 years.
Wow.
Literally invisible in the room.
Interesting.
When we have a product or service, I just learned this too. They say, build it and they will come. Do you realize that's a misquote? The movie does not say that. The movie says, build it and he will come. So it's an individual. Now, there's a whole psychology around that, but to be seen is important. And this is going back to the confidence and not feeling like an imposter syndrome, or, just having that internal leadership within ourselves of saying, I have a right to be seen. It's not about ego. It's just about being present. And then the second thing is to be safe. And what I really relate to this is no agenda. When someone comes in, whether it be an HR, whether it be an entrepreneurial, you're in a sales presentation, somebody like Shar, you have people that come up to the kiosks in the mall. There's no agenda. The agenda is to listen and to solve for X, their problem, their situation. Right. It's not about selling, converting, doing things in our timing. It's about doing things in their timing. When people really understand that you're there for them, they will let their guard down and they'll actually tell you how and what they need. And because of that, that is the whole process escalates. And then the third thing is to be relevant. And what I mean by that is not only do you have something that is needed in society, in the industry, whatever, but do people also concurrently want it? Because if you're ahead of the curve or behind the curve, it's never going to work if you force it. And that's where leadership becomes a dictatorship, not leadership. It's where we're forcing a size 6 shoe onto a size 10 foot. It's just not going to work. And we get frustrated, we get angry. But once we understand that what people are actually wanting, J. Paul Getty said, find a need and fill it. He didn't say build something and sell it. And so the relevancy is something that I really believe that most people either really haven't put their thought around, or they haven't given themselves permission to be a little more vulnerable, because all three things include vulnerability.
Fantastic. And you have a website where people can find you, Gary? How can people find you?
At GaryBarnesInternational.com. And Barnes is BARNES. International is spelled out.
Awesome. Well, you are always a wealth of information. Thank you so much. We just love talking to you and love all your analogies and nuggets of information. I'll definitely be applying those in my company. So thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate being here, and it's always an honor and it's a privilege to be able to serve.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you. So thank you all.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I'm making my homework to celebrate my failures this week, because that's what
Okay.
we do, right? Let's like cut the old story of, oh, I'm such a failure, I have to give up. Let's fail forward and just celebrate those failures with the wins, right?
Okay, so here, Jules, the last words of wisdom: become perfectly imperfect.
I'm working on that. I'm a recovering perfectionist, so it's taking some time, but we'll get there. It's all part of the journey, all part of the process, right?
You're right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for everybody for joining today, and I hope to see you next week on the
Yep.
People Strategy Forum. All right.
Okay.
Take care, everyone.
Everyone,
Bye.
Bye.
next week.